I didn't know I owned a green tie until 8 p.m. last night.
I found one with bits of green in it, but it just happens to be British Fire Service rugby section. But because Northern Ireland's part of it, there are green stripes going through it.
Mark, before we go live and start, can we just welcome Sue?
Oh, sorry, yes.
And introduce. Morning, so I'm Natalie. I know Kelly's spoken to you. Normally I'd have a chat, but so thank you ever so much for joining us. Mark's our trust chair and he'll be chairing the meeting. I'm just going to mute on you.
Yeah, a bit of mute, please.
So Mark will chair the meeting, Sue, and we'll do a little bit of business, things like minutes and things, and then we'll come to you if that's okay.
Okay, so what I'll do, Sue, I will go to Natalie, who will introduce, and Natalie will ask you then to do as appropriate. So Natalie will control that part of the agenda to make life easier for all of us. Okay, but thank you ever so much for coming today.
And thanks, team, for supporting. I know you've got some of the people you work with, haven't you, Sue, with us today?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, we're getting to the witching hour, folks. It's Parth, are we ready to go live with YouTube? So any time you're ready, please tell us when we're running, please.
Yep, we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. So as we approach 9 o'clock, I think it's I'd like to open the meeting at Herefordshire and Worcestershire Health and Care NHS Trust and welcome everybody to this morning's meeting. There's a couple of particular welcomes I'd like to do this morning, though. We've got some new people coming to their very first public board meeting. Dr. Onyi Okonkwo is a brand new Associate Non-Executive Director. It's Onyi's first board meeting in public, so very welcome, Onyi. Colin, although Colin has been with us as an Associate Non-Executive Director for a number of months now, he is now a full NED and indeed is our chair of our audit committee. So Colin, I think this is your first public board meeting as a full NED. I'd like to recognise that. And last, but by no means least, our new Chief Executive. It's Ellen's first board meeting today in public. And so Ellen, I don't need to welcome you as you've been welcomed already and you are the boss. But it's nice to see you with us for the first time. We have some guests with us today as well. All guests, whether on a Teams call or if you're viewing via YouTube, you're very welcome. And should you have questions following the meeting, then anybody you see on screen today, I'm sure will be more than willing to answer your questions. So I'm sure you can approach them after the meeting should you have anything you wish to clarify. But this week, we are proud to recognise and take part in Mental Health Awareness Week, which is a moment to pause and reflect on the importance of mental health and well-being for everybody. Mental health touches every aspect of our lives, and we firmly believe that supporting it, mental health that is just as critical as caring for physical health. Whether we're staff, patients, carers, or members of the wider community, we all benefit from a culture that prioritises kindness, understanding and support. The theme of this year's Mental Health Awareness Week is community, which reminds us of the power of connection and belonging. When we feel part of community, we're more likely to thrive, whether it's reaching out to a colleague, checking in with a friend, or simply taking a moment to listen without judgment. We all have a part to play in building a more passionate and inclusive community, and that is what this board and indeed our trust aims to do. But as you may notice, as part of our Mental Health Awareness Week campaign, today we are all taking part in Wear It Green Day, and you'll see our board and our staff wearing green or using green backgrounds in meetings as we do today. And I think, as I said before we started the meeting, there's been a lot of raiding wardrobes and cupboards looking for green, as we all wear green proudly to support Mental Health Awareness Week. And it's a symbol of solidarity aimed at raising awareness, ending stigma and encouraging open conversations about mental health. So in case you're wondering why there's a lot of green on the screen today, that is the reason. Okay, so if we move on to the substantive agenda, could I ask if we have any apologies? The apologies that I've received are from Simon Adams of Healthwatch, who is a very great supporter of this meeting, but unfortunately he has his own interviews to conduct today. and our own staff side, they are unable to send somebody along today because they have one of their own meetings. I believe it's their AGM today. Jill, are there any other apologies that I should be aware of?
No, there's not, Mark.
Thank you very much. So moving on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of March. If I could ask colleagues if you have any matters arising or matters of accuracy that we need to discuss. Show of hands from anybody. I can't see anything. Okay, in that case, I take those as a true record of the meeting, and thank you to Jill and the team, as always, a good record of the discussions that we had, and thank you for doing that, which then takes us to the action log. And there are, I think it's 2 actions which have both been closed, and I don't think anything needs to be said on those, as the Mental Health Joint Committee, it was merely making sure the names were correct on paper, which has been done, and the Board Assurance Framework will come up in today's meeting presented by Jill, and I know there's been a lot of work going on with that, and Jill and Colin have had that conversation. So with that, we'll close those actions. From the screen, I can see there is no matters arising. Thank you. And I've not been notified of any questions from members of the public, so I assume that remains the case, Jill?
That's correct.
Thank you. So we'll move on. The normal reminder, which is about declaration of interest. Board members, if you have any new declarations of interest, which of course you can find on our website, but please pass them on to Jill, or indeed if you think you may, then Jill is always available to give you her expert advice on to whether something should be declared or not. So with that, we'll then move on to what I consider to be a really important part of our agenda every time we meet, and that is our patient story. And I'll hand over to Natalie to introduce and remind colleagues that we've all watched the videos as sent out, but Natalie.
Thanks, Mark. So a big welcome to Sue. I'll hand over to Sue and the team to introduce themselves in a moment. I just want to pause for a moment. So we shared, Sue, your videos and the kind of précis you wrote with Board, and I've never had so many people come back to me and go, wow, what an inspirational woman. So what would be really fabulous if I could hand over to you and your team to introduce yourselves, and then just to share with us, you know, how your experience, and, you know, particularly about how you experience the trust and things, you know, we do well, and then things that we could do even better. But I thank you for your time this morning. I'll hand over to you, Sue.
Thank you. Pardon me, I'm a bit croaky. Where do I start? You've got, you know, my history of Big D, as I call it. I think what I really want to get across today is the fact that the system that I've experienced with the death of my partner isn't working very well for people with dementia, or in my case, it wasn't working very well. Glynis was taken ill 3 weeks before she died. She went to our local doctor. She was sent to, she was told she'd got something wrong with her, which was clearly not the case. It's too long a story to go into. The next day she was taken ill again, and the doctor that spoke to her sent her to the hospital, and Catherine, my daughter, who has stepped into Glynis's place, looked after me and took Glynis to hospital. We went together. We waited in the hospital waiting room for 4 hours before Glynis was admitted. And then she was in hospital for 2 nights and 3 days before she was sent home, being told that she was going to have, they've got cancer, but they hadn't found a primary, and she was going to be treated probably with chemotherapy in due course. They do more investigations. We came home. The next day she was very unwell again. she called the doctor, and they had said they would have a Teams meeting in the hospital and decide on her treatment. I think it was the third day that she'd been home. She was taken ill again. A para-doctor came out. He phoned directly to the consultant, and he came off the phone and said, they're only recommending palliative care. And within 3 weeks, she died in a hospice. It was a fairly horrendous journey. Without my daughter, I could not have coped. She stepped into the breach. I can't do things online. I keep failing with ICT. It keeps updating. People with dementia can't cope with updates on the computer. I'm getting worse and worse at dealing with it. My daughter was luckily able to take a sabbatical from work, unpaid, and she did everything from organising a hospital bed to come into the house for Glynis, although she was only in it for less than a week before she was transferred to a hospice. But Catherine dealt with all those things, everything I couldn't have done with. After Glynis's death, she dealt with organising the funeral. I couldn't have done that. I don't drive anymore. I haven't got transport to get to places without plenty of notice, and my neighbours are very good. But it was just horrendous getting through the whole lot. She organised the funeral. She managed everything before and after. She's just gone back to work now, and I'm pretty well coping on my own. She keeps coming in to check. But my question is, what do people do who don't have a daughter on hand? And what do people do if their partner, if Glynis had suddenly collapsed, for example, and I was further down the dementia road, she could have been lying on the floor for hours or days, and I could have been wandering the streets and nobody would know. At the end of this horrible journey, I rang the doctors and said, do you know that Glynis has died? And they said, no. They sent her to the hospital. There'd been no connection after that with the doctors. I said, do you know that Glynis is registered as my carer? No. And do you know I have Alzheimer's? Well, yes, if we look at your record, we know that. But that is, to me, that's a total disconnect. And if I hadn't had Catherine, I couldn't have coped with anything that had to be done, including all the administration required for Glynis paid all the bills. She got it all organised, and I had her looking after me. And all of a sudden, she wasn't there. That's my experience.
Thanks, Sue. And I'm so sorry for your loss. And as you said, the complexity then of the situation you were in makes that loss even more devastating and difficult to navigate, isn't it? And that's, can't underestimate how difficult this period of time's been for you. Before we come back and touch on that, how do we, what else we can do? I know Beth's with you. I'm just wondering, can you give us a bit of an oversight as to how the team support you and what they've done to help, and then we can broaden it out maybe to think about how we in a broader sense we help.
I must say that from the beginning of my dementia diagnosis, I've had amazing support from the early intervention team and Joanne and her colleagues. They've been at the end of the emails. If I need them, I let off steam. I send the odd crazy poem to them, but they've encouraged me. I come from a background of solution-focused thinking, and they've encouraged me to keep doing that, and that's given me motivation to keep going and pick myself up again. I'm picking myself up now. But not everybody has a background in solution-focused thinking. Not everybody has the family support, and not everybody has a Joanne. I think without her, I don't know where I would be, because there doesn't seem to be anywhere else in the system who is particularly bothered. That sounds awful, doesn't it?
No, that's how you feel. Joanne, did you want to come in at that point?
Yes, please. So my name's Joanne Martin. I'm a clinical psychologist within the Early Intervention Dementia Service. And I guess Sue's linking in with our team at this point in time is unusual in a sense, because Sue followed our traditional sort of process. You got referred from the GP, I think probably 3 years ago. Now, and you received a very, very early diagnosis of dementia, which is what the Early Intervention Dementia Service does. We work with people who they themselves want to know if they've got dementia, and they're approaching us at those early signs of cognitive changes, and people have got that awareness and insight like Sue has. So at the time you received our assessment process, the diagnostic process, the initial post-diagnostic support, and actually you and Glyn were coping very, very well as two phenomenally inspirational women. And so you were discharged as per our process, because we tend to keep people open for about 3 months after the diagnosis. So strictly speaking, the rest of the support that you've had, or the contact, I say, because it's very much a two-way process. The reason we've got that is because because you very kindly have helped us out. You have you came along some of our Living with Dementia groups to talk about your experience in terms of peer support and information for others. You very kindly did the videos for us, which is what we now show at our groups. You've linked in with the University of Worcester. You've linked in with the Alzheimer's Society. You have been a very, very valuable member of the Living and Supporting Well with Dementia workstream meetings that we're having currently. So it's because of your proactivity in terms of in terms of helping us, in terms of patient experience, and also Glynis as well, because she was involved in terms of her experience as a carer. You've been helping us with services, which is why our connections continued. So ordinarily, you wouldn't be linked in with EADS anymore, and most people, everyone else, isn't. And I think it shows there is that disconnect in the system, particularly for Worcestershire, less so for Herefordshire, because it's slightly different in Herefordshire, where people get discharged after that diagnosis. The process is to be linked in with Age UK, which you have been, and you have been having those kind of contact telephone numbers, but it kind of, I don't think it's always clear to people that in a sense is your main point of contact, or the GP for health reasons if you need. And I don't think the system works very well for that kind of picking up support when people need it further down the line. So I think there's a lot of work we need to do as an integrated care system for enabling people living with dementia and their families to know who's out there, to know who their point of contact is, and to get that support going forward. Sorry, that's my
Thanks, Joanne. Well, so I'm going to open it up now, because I can see a plethora of yellow hands have popped up. I'm sure going to ask you some questions, but also keep on this subject of how could we do things better and learn from what you've just described to us. So Sue, over to you, Sue Hinks.
Hi, Sue. I'm also a Sue, and I'm also a former headmistress. And I empathise hugely with your situation, because I am your daughter, Catherine. So I gave up being a headmistress because my mum has severe dementia. And unfortunately, my father passed away at 4 days' notice of COVID. And ever since then, my sister and I have cared for my mum. And as you say, the support isn't really out there, nor the knowledge. And going back to your situation about what if you didn't have children, neither my sister nor I have children. My sister's daughter unfortunately died. And we do constantly ask ourselves, what would happen if we were in the same situation? Who would look after us? And I can only say that, to applaud your activism and say that's really why I was interested in joining the board, because I could see that there were gaps in different things. And like you, I think that if you have made your life's work trying to do things for the better of others, you want to carry on with that. And so, everything that you're doing from the community's perspective is really important. But there are lots of people also within the NHS who understand totally your predicament and really would like to see it improve.
Thanks, Sue. Janet.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. Thank you very much, Sue. I also am very sorry for your loss. I think your videos that we watched were utterly inspiring, and I think that they had a lot of learning. I understand that they're made for people with dementia to watch, but I think they had a lot of learning for all of us. And in fact, I wanted to send them to my friends because I think, you know, you've got life lessons in there that are applicable to everybody. So thank you so much for allowing us to see those and sharing them. My question is the fact that obviously you are a highly articulate woman, and you have, as I think Joe has said, you've made contact with the service and they've reached out to you, and that's something that's not available to everybody, which I think worries me in the same way as I'm sure it worries everybody. But my question really is for Joe, and Joe, you slipped in when you were talking that actually Worcestershire is different from Herefordshire. I think I'd be really interested in hearing about those differences. Incidentally, just to point out here that actually Vina and I came and visited your service fortuitously last week, and we were absolutely, I think, blown away by what an amazing team you were, and how kind and caring you were. You know, I think we're very lucky to have you as a team within the trust. But I'm interested in that little hint that you gave us that things are different in Herefordshire. So I wonder if you can just expand on that and let us know, you know, what your view is about how we should be developing the service, please.
Can we hold on to that for a moment, because we've got a number of other hands up, and I'm just conscious of we can probably talk to Joe outside of board if there's specific questions, but we've only got Sue for a little bit of time this morning. So if we can do all the questions, and then we'll try and make sure that we've covered everything and picked up Sue's really clear points about what would happen to somebody else. So if I take to Vina and then to Sue Harris.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really going to echo Janet's words. You know, Sue, your videos reduced me to tears. It took me 3 tries to get through them, not because they were upsetting, but because they were so moving. You know, the joy and emotion in hearing your story was quite overwhelming in the best way. And your honesty and strength and commitment to helping other people really shines through. You're a really powerful example of how one person's voice and experience can make a real difference. And as Janet said, you know, we had the privilege of visiting the early intervention dementia service in Kidderminster last week, and hearing your story after witnessing that compassion and dedication of that team has really brought everything into sharp focus, I think. And you've helped bring to life the values that we see in NHS mental services. I know things go wrong all the time, but you've reminded us why lived experience is so vital to the work we do. So I think I speak on behalf of all of us here to say a huge thank you to you, Sue. But my question for the wider team is, you know, Sue has talked so movingly about the power of a positive mindset and her passion for helping others on the same journey, even in the face of all of these challenges. And I think I'd really like to know how we are using lived experience in dementia services and other services to help shape a more hopeful narrative. You know, are we involving people with dementia and their carers in service design across the board, not only in exceptional cases when we come across exceptional people like Sue? Are we doing that across the board? So I'd really love to learn more about that, please.
Thanks, Vina. Again, I'm going to park that question on my pad. We're going to come to Sue Harris.
Yes, and so sorry, Sue, there's a lot of Sues on this call today, aren't there? And I'm another Sue who's also got lived experience of being a carer. I lost my dad a couple of years ago, and I cared for him for 7 years with vascular dementia. Your videos, I say, like Vina, really were very, very emotional for me. I think in particular, you really highlighted some of the laughs along the way, some of those different emotions you experience. And certainly my children got some time with their granddad if he hadn't got dementia. I don't think they would have got in quite the same way. I got some quality time with him that was very different and really special. So I wanted to thank you for giving me that reminder and for reframing, as Vina says, you know, what's often seen as quite, you know, quite a bleak diagnosis into something that reminds us all that every day is a whole new journey. And you really, it really brought to light the importance of appreciating that. I suppose I wanted to flag as well that if Health Watch were here, they have gone out and spoken to hundreds of people who have been diagnosed with dementia, caring for dementia. They brought back some similar themes to what Sue, you told us around needing to know who you can contact when things change, because they do, and they happen overnight. And that importance as well of that post-diagnostic support being rounded and available for longer than 3 months. So we need to then look at that, and that's a piece of work at the moment. So I suppose my question is the same really. So as a board, how do we get that message out further? Is there more we could do with the videos you've done, with the experiences that you've shared? And yeah, like everybody else, I wanted to just thank you for being so open and honest and giving so much of your time, because it's a real game changer for people what you shared on the video. So thank you.
We'll go to Carol and then Onyé, and then I'll come back to you, Sue. You're on mute, Carol.
That better?
That's better.
Oh, fine. Sorry, I had my headphones plugged in. I'm just going to say thank you very much, Sue. And I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has said about you being inspirational and lived experience, but all I can say is ditto and thank you for being here. I think I want to just pick up on a couple of the little points there. I should put my hand up and say I'm the former head of a carers organisation, so I very much look at it from that point of view. And two things it's made me think about, which I think we need to think about a little bit going forward, is that need for the contingency planning, the what if something happens. I think somehow there's a mindset about the person with the big D will disappear first and leaving the carer behind, so the carer will sort everything out. But quite clearly, that's not always the case, and we need to be a bit realistic about that. I suppose the other thing, and probably both for our board and for our wider health and care system, is very much about, okay, we diagnose somebody with the big D. Then what? So we talked, John has put a message in the chat about the post-diagnostic support. But if, as the example you gave, you are a carer is on a GP record, but nobody notices, it's a sort of a so what? You know, we could do a lot of work about identifying carers and putting all that information in all sorts of different places. But if nothing actually happens as a result of it, why are we doing it? So I would like to take away that that's something that we would think of a little bit more widely about how we join some of this up so that it doesn't come as a surprise to your GP practice when your daughter contacts them to tell them about this. So that's a sort of reflection rather than a question, but thank you for provoking some of the thinking in us. So thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Onyé?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue. And yeah, as the new kid on the board, watching the videos, that was really emotive. And as a GP, you actually made an illness that I know when our patients get them, they feel it's a death sentence. But my question really is to all of us, how closely are we working with our social services? Because I still haven't had that connection been mentioned, because even from a GP side of it, we have social prescribers who work very closely in GP surgeries. Are we linking them into our patients? Are they part of your team, Joanne? And is the social services part of what we are offering patients? Because we really need that, you know, post-diagnostic support for our patients. How are we linking in with all that would be my question, and what I would like to understand further, because I think that's what we really are missing from this conversation.
Thanks, Onyé. So we've got the last hand is Ellen, and then I'm going to try and summarise and bring it all back together for Sue and Joanne. Over to you, Ellen.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Sue. Again, like so many have said, I was really moved by your story, and also just really impressed that you're finding the energy to come and talk to people, to make the videos, to really represent people in the same position to you as you, and your drive to keep doing that. I just find it hugely impressive, and thank you. There's been so many great points already, and I know we're probably running short of time. So just a very quick thing I wanted to drop in, because I didn't hear it come up yet, is there felt like there was quite a strong theme to me around the lack of visibility of shared records. Communication is so often at the heart, isn't it, of when things don't go so well for people in our services across the NHS. So we have these kind of individual interactions that are really fabulous, and we've heard about some of those as well for you, Sue, in terms of the team who supported you, the early diagnosis team. But it's where the connections happen that things didn't happen. So your GP didn't know, the hospital didn't communicate, our teams weren't in sight of what happened in other teams in the system. So there are probably some things for us to take away around. I'm really new, Sue, so I've only been in my job for less than 2 weeks, so I don't know either about where we are on things like the shared record, around visibility, access to each other's data and things like that. But I would be really interested for us to look through that lens with the patient at the heart. How are we sharing information between our services in the best interest so that we can provide the best care? And I really agree with the point just made as well about the importance of social care in that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Sue, you have clearly sparked probably the most detailed conversation, discussion that we've had from a patient's story. And I'm really sorry that we can't, because this clearly is, we could talk about this at length. And for me, Mark, it feels like we've got a board development session emerging from this around all of the issues. So you've given us a really good challenge too, haven't you, of what we could do and should do better ourselves, but equally then how we work in the system and what the system offer is, whether that's with the communication, the social services, local authority, the voluntary sector. And I know Joanne said you're going to pop in and answer a question. If we take those away, Sue, but carry on engaging with you, if that's okay, because I think we're not going to be able to answer all of those today, but I hope what you hear is you've generated a lot of passion and enthusiasm and keenness to really then give this some focused time and attention, and very timely, because as they've said, we have this review in the system that's already underway that we can really then shape and influence. Is that okay, Sue?
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Is that me?
Too many Sues. Yeah.
Too many Sues. Yes, that's fine. I get the odd communication from Age UK, but that's because I had a stroke sometime last year. I can't remember when it was now. That's a good thing about memory loss. But I had a mild stroke. I was only in hospital for 2 days, I think, or one. No, 2 days. But it did affect my speech and my finger memory and playing the harp and all that. They are starting to improve, but I don't know where I started this. Why did I start this conversation? Oh, yeah, I get emails and various phone calls from Age UK, but that's been associated with stroke, I think, not with the Alzheimer's. I don't know. But occasionally they get in touch with me and make a phone call and say, "Are you okay?" And I say yes.
That is related to the dementia, Sue, rather than the stroke.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But I think that also shows that people don't know where the different bits come in and how everything links together, which is absolutely the case. And us as professionals can't always navigate it, let alone expecting people who access our services and family members who are doing a heck of a lot to support them being able to navigate it.
I think you are all amazing anyway, that you're even bothering to do things for us.
Thank you, Sue. It's our pleasure and what we really want to do. We want to make things better. So I'm going to hand back over to Mark at that point. To
Thank you very much, Natalie. There's a couple of things I was going to say to finish, if I may, Sue. And this session has been there. This is the greatest example of why we start every board meeting with a patient story. It grounds us in why we as a board, why we as a trust are here, and that is to make things better for the patients and for the communities we serve. And to listen to you, Sue, and to hear the gaps in care or the gaps in communication, because that's often, communication is often within the NHS one of the major problems when we talk about the patient experience. In front of the clinicians, often it's a very good experience, but it's the communication between that tends to let us down. And I think listening to you has reinforced that. But on this call, you have our Chief Medical Officer, John, who actually put a note in the chat. He leads a dementia programme board across Herefordshire and Worcestershire. So you can tell he's been influenced by this and wants to find out more. Also on the call is Carol, who's got a huge amount of experience in the carer regime. So within the people that have just listened to your story really are the people that are here to listen and are the right people. That's quite an important thing. Your story has come to the right people to hopefully affect a difference. And I think, as Natalie said, we're all about improvement. And if we can improve for you and for others, then your story has been very, very well founded. And if I could add to what somebody else said, I viewed your videos, and we've had patient stories before, every board meeting, but I viewed your videos, and this was the first time I actually called my wife over and said, have a look at this. This is inspirational, not only about dementia, but it's about how you dealt with life and your poetry and your garden. And Vina said she was in tears, and I must admit, I was welling up listening to it. And that's the impact you've had, not just individually, but you will actually have an impact on the system, and you'll have an impact on what we do going ahead. So a real heartfelt thank you to you, the team around you, to your, I know Catherine, your daughter, looking after you, and to our team that have been looking after and bringing you forward. Thank you ever so much, Joe. And I know Carol and Vina have visited you recently and were very impressed with what they saw and what they heard. And I don't care about overrunning on matters like this. There is nothing more important, I think, to our board than listening to what we heard here today, getting an understanding, and there will be follow-ups. Okay, I can commit to you there will be follow-ups from this. This isn't just us listening and then moving on to something else. There will be follow-ups. And when I said that, I already saw Natalie nod because she's in front of me on the screen. But with John and other people on the board, we'll follow it up and we will try our best to make things better. Thank you so much for coming along today.
Can I just say thank you very much for having me and for listening and being such all of you, being an inspiration to me to keep going. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Sue. You make a difference. You make a difference. You really do. Thank you so much for coming along today. But we have to move on with the rest of our business now. But
I'll let you get on with your.
You've certainly set a most fantastic foundation for the rest of our board meeting today. Thank you so much. And it's been lovely to see you on screen. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Natalie, and thank you to the team for bringing Sue's story forward to us, and the way that you've done it with the videos now has been brilliant. Thank you ever so much. If we move now on to the rest of our agenda, before I do move on to the next bit, can I remind us that we wish to, as a board, focus on our priorities, our risks, the outliers, the problems, and in all of that, especially with what we just heard, it needs to be patient-centred in all of those things. So I could just plant that in everybody's mind as we move into our substantive agenda, and then ask and invite our Chief Executive to give a first report, please. Ellen.
Thank you, Chair. And I am, as I said, very pleased to be here and feeling hugely inspired at the opening of this meeting today. And actually, it flows really well into what I've opened my report with in terms of just sharing really with the board and our colleagues, is that it feels like a huge privilege for me actually to have this opportunity to lead an organisation that makes a real difference to people's lives here in Herefordshire, Worcestershire. And we've just heard about that difference, haven't we, in terms of the story and putting the patient at the heart of everything we do. I've shared a bit in the report about my plans over the first few months while I'm in the trust. I've got a plan to really get out and about and spend this first bit of time in the organisation doing as much as I can to learn about where we are and what it feels like to be on the end of our services effectively. So as I've shared in the report, there are some ways I'm going to frame some of those questions around, you know, what does it feel like to be a patient in our services? So we've really heard about that this morning. And also, what do our patients and our communities, carers, families need from us in order for our services to sort of move into that even better if? So I know there's loads of really great stuff. And one of my other questions is, what are we really proud of? So what do we do well? But also, where is that opportunity for us to do even better if? Because the NHS is a big and complex place, and there's always opportunities for improvement, certainly in every organisation that I've ever worked in. So my focus is going to be on talking to as many people as I can, talking to patients, colleagues and partners, and just really then pulling all of that together into something that I can share with this board, and also to form an input to our trust strategy refresh, which we've got planned for the autumn. I think it's probably also important for us, for me to note and for us to recognise, and there's a bit more later on in the report in detail on this, but that the national context is really challenging at the moment. In the broader NHS, and people will have heard in the news and so on some of the really significant changes that are going on with NHS England and integrated care boards. And we need to be really mindful of the impact that has on our colleagues, but also think about the opportunities for how our trust can continue to move forward in this difficult context, to focus on patients, focus on carers, focusing on delivering the best care, and how our organisation needs to evolve to enable us to keep doing that. And I think there will be places where we need to think about whether there are new spaces we need to move into in terms of the things we're working on or leading in the system, but doing that in a mindful way of the impact on our other partners in the system and a positive way as well. So that's a bit about the kind of setting the scene. My report covers a whole wide range of things actually that have been happening both in the trust, in the system and in the national context. So I'll just pick up a few things to share with the board today, and I'm happy to take questions obviously on anything that's in the report. So I think the first thing I'll start with, and it's right at the top of the report, is our successful launch of our new EPR system this week, Rio. So that's a huge achievement, actually. So I've been in organisations before where we've had EPRs launched that didn't go quite as smoothly as this. So I think we should just note and give huge credit to our colleagues in the digital team for landing it as smoothly as they did. There are, of course, a few teething problems. There never isn't with this kind of thing, but so far so good, and a huge achievement for all concerned. So just want to say a huge thank you to them, and we continue to work on the Rio rollout. I was actually talking to the digital team earlier in the week and hearing about some of the exciting opportunities there are to expand as well into use of AI and things like that. So I think watch this space in terms of the digital piece and some real opportunities there. We've also had the CQC annual community mental health survey. And there were some positives in here for us, but still some improvement we can make. So overall, we were in the ballpark, I think it's fair to say. Although we had some areas where we didn't do quite as well than some of the kind of peer group, if you like. So I'm going to be really thinking about how can we learn from that and build and continue to improve the patient experience and the patient reported experience. We've also referenced that it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and I think you talked about that at the top of the meeting, Mark, so we won't go into a lot of detail on that further, but it's really important we raise awareness, but also think about how we support support each other, our colleagues, in Mental Health Awareness Week. So I attended the Trust induction on Monday this week, and I was actually really impressed by the really comprehensive offer that we make as a trust to our staff around wellbeing and support. And so I think it's also worth sometimes checking in is, are we aware of everything that's available for wellbeing and support? So as the report referenced, there are materials we can download from the intranet. There are some really supportive tools in there, the conversation cards, the personal action plans, and a whole range of other support that is there for our colleagues. And also there's training available. It's not actually referenced in the report. I learned about training available for our staff in things like mental health first aid, and I'd really encourage people to take up those opportunities so we can support each other in challenging times. Conscious of time, I'm not going to go through all of, as I say, not going to read through all of the things in the report, but a couple of things that I would like to also just flag is I was really excited to see the Art for Health campaign. I do think art has a huge part to play in the way that our sites and our spaces feel. So I was really interested to see that we're part of that campaign, and I think it provides a great opportunity for the public to get involved in really bringing our spaces to life and making them feel like friendly and personalised places that reflect our communities that we serve and work within. So I think that's a great initiative. And there's a number of other really positive things in there as well that are great to read about. We've also, again, picking out a few highlights, you'll see that I reordered the report actually so that we talk about our local things first and then some national context later. So I hope everyone's happy with that in the board. But picking up on a few more county things that have been happening, I was also really pleased to see that Sarah Dugan, the former chief executive of our organisation, has been appointed as the independent chair of the VCSE Alliance in Worcestershire. And I'm meeting Sarah soon to talk about how we can work really closely together in the integrated care system. Working with the voluntary community sector is something I feel really passionately about, and I'm keen to see how we can be as integrated as possible with our VCSE partners. I mentioned in the national context some of the organisational change. We had a call this week ourselves with Sir Jim Mackey, who's referenced in the national context piece, about some of the national policy direction. I think the main thing to take out of there is that there was a real focus on the importance of neighbourhood health and a view that organisations such as ourselves have a real contribution to make in that space. So I don't think that's new, but I think it was really encouraging to hear that emphasis on neighbourhood health and the priority that community and mental health trusts can take in that space. And that's something that I think is an opportunity for us. I think important to note as well the Supreme Court ruling and the impact that that's had as well in terms of around Sex in the Equality Act means biological sex. We have an interim update, and we do recognise the impact that that could have on some staff members, particularly those in the trans community and so on. But we have issued a communication to all of our teams. Our policies remain the same until we have more guidance, but I would also just like to say that we have support available in the organisation if anyone needs to seek it. We also don't as yet have NHS specific guidance, but once that's received, we will of course act accordingly. I think I would also pull out that we have, I think it is relevant to note that we have a new performance assessment framework. That is currently out for consultation, and we will see where that will take us. I think it's interesting to see that we have this new framework whilst we're also going through organisational change, and some of the roles of our system around performance management are changing, but we'll see where that lands and obviously are taking part in the consultation. I think other than that, I will probably pause there because, as I say, there is a lot of content in the report, and I'm sure members have read the report, and I'm very happy to take questions on any part of the report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And Colin, Sean Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Ellen. Glad to see you on board. We're living in very interesting times, to say the least, with lots of major strategic change going on. But I welcomed your emphasis and highlighting the Art for Health, because I think those sorts of initiatives are crucial for building links between organisations and the community. And the question is a detailed one, but your note talks about the trust as inviting people, which tends to mean it's self-selecting. But I wondered, are we able to target various groups within our overall community who might be able to contribute in a different type of way, but wouldn't necessarily put their hand up?
Colin, this is like, I could probably talk for a good 20 minutes on the topic of arts and health. So I absolutely promise my board colleagues that I won't do that. But I think your question is actually music to my ears. So one of the things that I have been involved in over the years, and I'm still a member of, is the all-party parliamentary group on arts and health. So we still, we've actually recently reconvened as an all-party parliamentary group. And as part of that, we produced a report on creative health and its application in the NHS. And in my previous roles, we developed a whole number of different creative health offers, particularly around actually supporting people in the mental health space across a range of diagnoses. So we just heard from Sue and the importance of creativity to her management of her condition, and we had a whole range of things that we did with patients with people living with dementia in my previous health system. We worked with a really inspirational organisation called Mindsong, who would use singing as a way to engage people with dementia, creative arts, often as a medium for building connection with communities, building connection with other people with similar health conditions, and the benefits of that, and that's what's in the kind of national report that I've been a part of producing as well, are well, they're huge. So I feel really passionate about this, and one of the things that I'm really keen to do is to see what opportunities there are to integrate creative health approaches into services that we offer. I'm sure there are examples of that already in our system that I just don't know about yet. So yeah, I think it has a huge part to play in terms of building links with our community, but creating like holistic offers for people that we support in our services.
Vina, and then or unless Natalie, was yours something specific or relation to what? Right, okay, Vina then, please.
Thank you. Yes, hello and welcome again, Ellen. Ellen, I think many of us attended the Let's Talk session you presented last week, and you said that you wanted to hit the ground listening, which I think kind of sums up your approach. And I wondered, from your early conversations with staff and service users, what you see are the Trust's most urgent challenges at this stage.
Thank you, Vina. So it's a really good question. And yes, that is absolutely what I'm here to do, hit the ground listening and really get to know the organisation in this first few months. So firstly, I'll just say, I think there are loads of positives. So one thing I've been struck with is a really warm and genuine welcome from staff, and a real sense of a commitment to the organisation, to the values and the things that are our core purpose. So I have been really struck by that, and it's really a good thing to feel in terms of the values of the organisation living through the staff and the work that we're doing. In terms of the challenges, I think, again, very early days, and I am happy, of course, to share as I go through the next few months regularly in my update about the things that I'm hearing. I think there is a theme that dovetails really nicely to some of what we heard in our patient story today, actually. So that chimed with some of the things that I'm hearing around we're not always quite as good at the communication as we would like to be. Communication in services, communication with each other. And so that doesn't surprise me because we're a big, complex organisation in a big and complex system. So in a way, that is not a surprise to hear that that can be a challenge. So one of the things for me is to really think about what's our style of communication with each other? How can we open up the conversation, communicate well with staff, be accessible as a board and leadership team? That's one of the reasons why I've started doing things like the video message, about providing a range of channels, the way that people can write to me and things like that, and really open up the conversation. And also why I'm going to be curious to find out where we are in terms of some of our integration of the way we share information around services, and put the patient at the heart of how we communicate with each other and use our information, use our data. Again, often I think, and this is not unique to Herefordshire and Worcestershire, data and information flows happen around service lines rather than aligned around patients. So we might not know, for example, that we see one patient in 5, 6, 7 of our services at the same time as they are in 5, 6, 7 services with our acute colleagues, and so on and so forth. And without taking up too much time on this point, but I do think this is a really important point. I'll share an example with you. So I have myself a patient mentor, so somebody I work with who tells me about the experience of living with her long-term conditions. She's a young person, and at the last log of the number of services that are in contact with her, it was 32. So if you're in the middle of that and you have 32 different points of contact across physical health, mental health, social care. Now, she lives in Gloucestershire because this is somebody I've been working with for a while. But again, I don't suppose her experiences will be particularly unique. So there's something about how do we start to look differently with the patient at the centre about the way we interact and the number of offers we might put around somebody who presents into health and care services, particularly with complex needs. So in her case, she's a young person with a range of mental health and physical conditions, and also social care needs around being a looked after child, etc. And the myriad of things in her book, I was thinking to myself, I think I would struggle to navigate all of those things, and I probably have more resources at my fingertips to be able to do that. So I think those would be the key challenges that I'll outline at this early stage. Communication between us and collectively as a wide and diverse organisation to be the best that we can be at working with each other positively, and communication with our patients and coordinating and joining up our services.
Thank you, Ellen. And I hope Vina's question didn't take you back to the trauma of your interview.
No, I'm very... Not at all.
Okay, we moved to Natalie, please, before we then move to Sue. Natalie.
Thanks. A very brief point. I just wanted on the staying safe from suicide part of your report, Ellen. I was really pleased to see that, and obviously we've been doing lots of work. I can touch on my quality report later around patients, but I also really want to take the moment to think about how that impacts staff. So we know that nurses have a 23% higher suicide rate than the general population, and that female nurses are disproportionately affected within that as well. So we're doing something as an ICB to really look at what our health and wellbeing offer, but really focusing on that, taking advantage of the green, it's good to talk day, that we know that suicide risk is there in nurses, and we're taking proactive action to kind of preempt that talking and reaching out for help.
Thank you, Natalie. And
that's a really important point. Yeah,
I'm happy to admit I was unaware of that statistic with regard to nurses. So bearing in mind what today and our background is all about, thank you ever so much for raising it, especially as a man that has a daughter as a nurse as well. But it's an important statistic and one we need to remind ourselves regularly. Thank you. Sue.
Hi, Ellen. Nice to see you. I just want to go back to that arts point. That was really fascinating. And I've got two things to say. The first is, obviously, we have a charitable fund associated with the trust. So please do draw on that for any of your initiatives. But when you said that you're listening, do you think one of the things you could listen for when you go into an environment is what the audio environment is like? One of the things that concerns me potentially neurodivergent patients, also patients maybe with sight loss or with hearing difficulties who might be wearing a hearing aid, is that sometimes our audio impression is very overstimulating, and sometimes the audio impression is for maybe a generation which isn't always reflective of what the patient's generation is. So I particularly think when people are listening to a particular radio station, it may or may not be conducive to a therapeutic atmosphere. It may be conducive to a working environment which stimulates workers, but it may not be useful, for example, for frailer people coming in who maybe have got hearing aids and for whom everything is amplified. So I think music is a superb way of offering therapy to patients, but I do sometimes think that we don't quite get the auditive background right in some of our institutions and establishments.
Thank you, Sue. And I really think this is a very important point, and it's again about walking in the patient's shoes and how does it feel to be in that environment and respecting the needs of different individuals. So one of my responsibilities in my last role was around urgent and emergency care, and one thing I was very pleased that your offer at charitable funds, I will be guaranteed to have many ideas, so you may regret offering me that, but one thing we did in the A&E department in Gloucestershire Hospitals Trust, and that was something that was stimulated by our group, was by noise cancelling headphones for mental health patients, because if you are, it's a range of other things that the staff could offer to provide a calming environment. And then actually indeed we did even have a kind of lights, a very calming lights installation that we worked with the charity on for young people who went to the emergency department in emotional distress, and it was about creating a calming, noise appropriate, safe space, rather than somebody who's in distress and is in a place full of beeps and noises and crashes and busyness and bright lights, and that's not helpful. So yeah, really recognise what you say and love your offer. Thank you.
And also, if you have dementia, it's not great to have all of that going on. You try and follow every piece of sound that you hear, and it's very confusing.
Yeah, very distressing. I agree completely.
Thank you, Sue. And for public consumption, as well as Ellen, you probably haven't seen the chat. I think Natalie's popped in that we are trialling this approach within our MRUs at this moment in time. So we'll finish up with Anya.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ellen, and thank you for the report. Just a quick question, really. In terms of the Mental Health Act, the Supreme Court ruling, I know you've hit the ground listening, which is brilliant and absolutely fantastic. My only concern is, the group, the staff group we're talking about, don't always feel psychologically safe to speak up. So I know you're reaching out to them and saying, reach out if you need help. I just wondered how we're using our staff networks in terms of the fact that, we create this psychological safe space, which is where they might feel comfortable to share, because it's going to be a difficult period for everybody. So while we are waiting for this directive, and if we really want to have their voices, how are we connecting in with the staff networks where they feel they have that space to express what they are feeling as they're, by using those networks to get the information that they need?
Yeah, thank you for your question. And I really agree with the point you make. So in leadership positions, we just by the very nature of our job titles and so on, we may not be as accessible as we would like to think that we are. You know, that's just the nature of it, although I'm very happy to talk to anybody at any time about anything. Diary permitting, she said, as Rachel's thinking in the background, goodness. But I think your point is really well made, and I feel the same. So it was really important to me to connect with the staff networks early. So it's something that I scheduled in actually for my second day here in the trust. So I had hosted a lunch with the staff networks to meet the staff network leads personally, to convey to them that I want to be an open door in terms of the connection that they have out to the staff. Groups that they represent, but also their connection and kind of that ear to the ground. Some people call it the street corners of your organisation. You know, what's being said on the street corners, and how do we start to hear that, those voices that are, you know, what are the things that are concerning our colleagues, and are we tapped into that? So I personally met with staff networks. We are network leads, and we have a WhatsApp group, and we have an ongoing conversation. So I'm going to meet regularly once a month with the leads to connect.
Thank you, Elaine. Did you wish to offer?
Yes, I was only going to add essentially to what you were saying, Ellen. I think the staff networks have really appreciated your early connection with them, and I meet with them fairly regularly. I met with them yesterday. Just on your specific question, Anya, around the recent Supreme Court ruling, we're specifically working with our LGBTQ plus network colleagues and exploring how we can support them going forward. We are in a holding position until we get greater clarity from Equality Human Rights Commission, but we're definitely docked in.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, sorry, because I did miss that part of your question. So that was a great case in point. So one of the things that Network Lead said to us is that they really appreciate when we get communication out. It needs to be timely, because if we leave a gap until we communicate, that raises concern, and the gap says as much as maybe not exactly crafting the right words. So that's part of the sort of conversation we had, and just the importance of having, back to my point about communication is a theme, is that sometimes it's not just what we say, but what we don't say, and the timeliness of us getting the messages out across our teams.
Okay, and quick final point from John.
Yes, so I think we need to be aware that the staff who are transgender or transitioning are a very small cohort within the LGBTQ staff network. So in addition to the parts of contact which Ellen and Elaine have mentioned, I'm also the sponsor for the transgender staff network. So the usual way they contact me is through the EDI lead, and I kind of run clinic type appointments with them on their own terms when they want to raise any particular issues with me or any concerns, and we address it through that way as well.
Thank you, John. Okay, thank you, Ellen. I think I can say a really successful first report. Some good stuff in there, and good briefing. And I think we get a feel for how you will conduct your sort of leadership through our trust. So thank you for that. We're a few minutes behind, but rightly so. We had a fantastic patient story, and it's been great to hear from Ellen for the first time in a public setting. It's not just about us. The public have a right to understand the leadership of their local services, and they've certainly got that from what we've heard from Ellen this morning. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now. Jill, Board Assurance Framework and the High Level Risk Register, please.
Yes, so in some ways, this paper and the next paper need to be read in tandem, and perhaps should have thought about the order on the agenda, because of course the next paper is where Sue will be asking board to approve the priority programmes for the next 12 months or so. And of course the Board Assurance Framework is the risks that arise from strategic objectives and how we're seeking to deliver those. And so what I have done is included the priority programmes on the basis that they are going to be approved by board in the subsequent paper. One of the things that I've been seeking to refine with our board assurance framework is how we can make this more effective for committee meetings for the committee chairs, so that we've got a great deal of clarity in terms of what are the priority programmes, which committee is responsible for which strategic objective, and what are the milestones that are due to be achieved in year. And just because of the reporting cycle, we haven't quite got all of the milestones in there, but what I will be able to send round before the next round of committee meetings at the start of July are the milestones, probably 3-4 milestones for each priority programme in year, to actually identify the actions that are going to be completed in year. And that should, of course, then allow the committee chairs to focus at the relevant committee as to whether we're on track, whether we've got a good level of assurance, or whether we need to escalate things because we're not achieving the milestones. And so I would hope that by the time we get to the next round of committees in early July, that we should have that clarity with each senior responsible officer for each priority programme agreeing what are the milestones in year, and then they can be held to account for that. We've continued to refine the board assurance framework, and although I noticed that I've managed to leave on the 2024-25, and it should of course be 25-26, and we've also got in the paper the high level risks, which if anybody's got any questions, I might need to defer to colleagues on the screen about the detail of some of those. But I think it's very much, we look at this paper alongside the priority programmes that's coming next, and then we should be using our board assurance framework to identify where things are on track, off track, and actually what do we need to do about that, and whether things need to be escalated to trust board because perhaps the programme isn't delivering the objective that we need to do. And I know that's very much been the focus of the work that we've been doing. I'm happy to take any questions on any part of it.
Thank you, Jill, and I'm sure colleagues are aware there continues to be a huge amount of work that goes on in the background, really, with regard to the BAF and the risks, and indeed the three items: the BAF, strategic partnerships, policy programme updates, and operational update, can all be sort of seen together, really, as to driving the work and how we're doing with the work in the trust. I'll move to Janet. Janet, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Jill. Yeah, just to say, very supportive of the approach, and I think it will make, as a committee chair in quality and safety, I do think it will make it hopefully easier for us to gain the assurance we should be. But my specific question actually was one that just jumped out at me, and I wonder if it jumped out at other people as well, which was actually around the high level risks. And just to say that most of them are fairly high level and fairly strategic, but I picked out the one around the dangerous structure and the unstable stone wall affected by tree growth, which we've got a score of 16, which is mitigated as 16. And I just wondered if we could have more information about that, because it struck me as though that should be something that we could sort out fairly simply, particularly if it's such a high level risk.
I think I'll defer to Robert if that's okay, because I had an exchange with Robert about it in looking at the report, and I think he might have a bit more detail about that risk.
Yeah, I'll maybe let Beach come in. This was just an immediate issue that came up. We've had a regulatory notice around it. It was discussed at F&P, so it's all in hand in terms of remediating it, but it's a good example of something that's come through and happened in terms of a particular wall needing some action. It's been raised on the risk register. We expect it to de-escalate reasonably quickly. It was discussed at F&P. Beej, I think I wasn't actually at F&P, but Beej, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
I think you've covered it, Robert. I think the severity of the risk was principally in light of the public risk involved with the falling wall. Our own very own sycamore tree issue is going to be resolved fairly soon, I understand.
Okay, if there's nothing else, and I can't see anybody else showing, we are asked to agree the BAF where it is. Can we do that, please? I take it on an exception basis. Yes, everybody's sort of nodding and no disagreement, so the BAF is agreed. And I remind colleagues that at the end of this meeting, we will return to ask ourselves whether there's anything that we've heard today or that has been raised that makes us think we need to add to the BAF, subtract from the BAF, or make sure that it's in some ways included. Okay, if we could then move on to Sue. Priority programme update, please.
Yes, thank you. And you will all note it's a longer paper than you would usually receive. So that's because it's picking up the progress and the year end of 24-25 against the 15 priorities we agreed as a board last year, and obviously sets out the priorities for 25-26. So that's the context for it being quite a lengthy read, because it's really sort of those two elements combined. So just to pick up the headlines then, in terms of the status for 24-25, we put these against delivered, on track, delayed due to system changes, or slipped. The details then in the paper, which picks up which milestones we've met and where we've got particular issues and why that might be, and the mitigations around that, and picks up the assurance levels. And then moving to 25-26, we've obviously spent a lot of time as a board around the national planning expectations on ourselves as a trust, our contributions and our deliverables. So I don't think the priorities that you've got outlined there are any surprise. We had a longer conversation at F&P setting out the work programme for next year, but asking the board to approve the 13 priorities. I think the piece of work that I just wanted to build on Jill's conversation, what we've really tried to do for this coming year is be very, very clear on the SRO, so the accountable officer, the reporting committee, the links to the strategic objectives, so it is really transparent. What are we doing then to deliver against our strategy? Work that will go around in the next cycle, that's already happening between my team and Leeds, is to set the 3 or 4 high level priorities, milestones for each of those priorities, and then it be really explicit when it comes to committee. These are the 3 or 4 things that are happening against this. You'll be able to then very clearly see where things may not be on track, and then be able to take redressive action as needed. And that then pulls back round to the conversation we had earlier, which Ellen was outlining, and we talk a lot about in committees in the last cycle. It's that, so what's the impact then for our patients? Where are those improvements? So that should really then pull that through. So Jill and I have been working to make sure that that comes back through for the July reporting cycle in full, and that picks up then those links to the BAF that Jill's already outlined. I think just before I finish up, I wasn't going to pick up any of the detail on the programmes themselves, so I'm more than happy to do so with colleagues on the screen. Is that obviously we were expecting the long-term plan next month, and we now have Ellen with us, so the work on the strategy will start to commence, very much looking to that 100-day conversation to look at what are we hearing, what is it people want from us as an organisation, where are we positioned in terms of some of those big policy changes, for example, around neighbourhood health. So I don't think that's new to us as an organisation, but some of the language is changing slightly, and we want to make sure that when we pull through that strategic conversation, we're reflecting that accordingly. So that work's happening with the expected date to sign the trust strategy off in November later on this year. So there wasn't anything else I wanted to say other than, yes, we could sort of note the progress against 24-25, which, given some of the turbulence for that year, we've delivered a lot, and where we've slipped, hopefully people can absolutely see why that is and what we've done. Some of the programmes of work were always going to be over a longer period. They were linked very much to some of the work we wanted to do over the improvement agenda, and then as a board to approve the 13 priorities that we've rolled forward into this year's reporting cycle.
Thank you, Sue, and a particularly useful report and comprehensive. Thank you. Veena and then Colin. Veena.
Thank you for that, Sue. You kind of touched on this briefly, but I just wondered whether we could have a little bit more meat on the bones, please. In terms of what assurance can the board take that reaching programme milestones will actually lead to meaningful, measurable improvements? So when we look at the community paediatrics programme, based on its delayed progress, currently has quite a low assurance level of 2. So what assurance can we take that reaching the milestones set out in your paper will result in meaningful improvements for children and families, rather than just administrative or process-based achievements? How are we tracking actual impact on outcomes, such as reduced waiting times, improved access, earlier interventions, that sort of thing?
Don't know if has Matthew shown to answer there? I thought
Yeah,
Matthew's
I'd like to
hand
say
pop up.
Matthew's going to jump in. I was going to say that the PMO have spent a lot of time working with teams around the scope of programmes and setting out a different set of measurables. As John put into the chat, at the moment, the level of assurance does correlate, doesn't it, to the impact? So we're not seeing the impact that we want, and that is therefore showing on that low assurance level. So the piece really is then, how do we pick up pace when we know that that's happening, and then make sure that we're mobilising those metrics that we believe, or those actions that we believe are going to have the biggest impact. We are spending more time at the beginning of programmes now, Vina, trying to set that out, taking in a myriad of different viewpoints, whether that is our patients, our carers, our partners, as well as our staff, to try and make sure there's a broader input into what is it here that good would look like, and then try and have something more specific to chunk up. I think that's been part of the challenge with this programme. There's been quite a lot of competing priorities, so we went quite process heavy early. And clearly we've still got work to do then to show that we're turning the dial. But Matthew, I saw your hand come up, so shall I pass that piece over to yourself?
And yes, just very briefly, I suppose, the majority of our metrics that we're measuring, and indeed how we're tracking the success of this programme, is in terms of accessibility. So accessibility in terms of children who've successfully had EHCP assessments completed, the timeliness of the care plan being produced, the length of time waiting, both median length of time and the number of long waiters. So most of the metrics, in fact, are based on patients and their experience. So also measured but not necessarily reported in this programme are complaint rates and recurrent themes of complaint responses. So those are all things that are being measured in the working groups of the programme, but don't necessarily appear in the programme report itself.
Thank you, Matthew. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Two observations, if I may, one relating to old year, so to speak, one for the new year. So in terms of 24-25, so the virtual ward rollout is at assurance level 2 at the moment, and I'm conscious of the discussion that took place yesterday at the system-wide briefing, where the perception seemed to be that virtual wards are more expensive than people being in a traditional hospital setting, so to speak, which shook me, and it's counterintuitive because so many platforms have been extolling the virtue of virtual wards for so long. So are we really in a position where we can meaningfully make some progress, or is there just too much uncertainty? So I know that's a big question, but just to put the second one out, and then I'll leave it to come back to me. It's really to say on the new set of priorities for next year, going back to our conversation of finance, I did raise the question about how well we reflect our ambitions around addressing health inequalities in those priorities. And I know you went away to think about it, so I wondered if you could just give me an update on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Colin. And the health inequalities, we've obviously put some very much against that strategic objective, but I think the real trick is to get it to be into the warp and weft of the way that we do all of our quality improvement. So we've now got that new oversight group and that approach very much happening of collating what's already happening and scaling that up and looking for greater opportunities. I think for me, there's that, as the sort of the health inequalities lead, very much sitting in that transformational space. I think there's more to do to make sure that we're getting that bolted into the PMO projects early. So that's a piece of work that we'll be doing as we move on through, looking again at the 25-26 cycle for PMB. Is there more we can pull through now around that? It will help now as well that we moved forward with Rio, because some of what's been holding us back has been some of that collation of data. Public Health are also supporting that. So without some of that information, I think we've been working to do some QI improvements, but without necessarily being able to have some of the scale and impact. So what I'd like to do, Collins, is probably spend a little bit more time with you offline to talk through and make sure that we're embedding that sufficiently. I'd welcome an extra pair of eyes on that, perhaps one for Ellen as well, with a different system lens on how we can basically pull that through more explicitly as part of our reporting. The virtual ward, that is not the first time that I've heard that conversation. I think there's degrees where hospital at home absolutely delivers and does so very efficiently. We've seen that in older adult mental health, where we've got really great models of care. So I was going to ask Matthew if he wanted to give a comment, because I think for me it's all about then the degrees of frailty that we're supporting, and then the level of expertise and how we can do that efficiently. That seems to vary model by model. So it might be that depending on what's being reviewed, some models are going to be potentially more expensive than a bed, but other models are definitely more efficient. But overall, we know it's better for patients, because they're not coming into hospital, and therefore they are getting a better experience, so, you know, in all likelihood a better outcome from their health point of view. So how much that's been modelled through financially is also going to have to be part of that configuration. But I didn't know, Matthew, whether you had any thoughts as sort of lead for urgent care.
Yeah, just a couple of things to say. I think one is that as Sue's rightly says, some models are more cost effective. So the mental health hospital at home that we run for older adults, it costs about a third less comparatively than equivalent inpatient care. So very intensive care and supporting people's homes as an alternative hospital admission, very well accepted by patients and their carers. You know, and it's done a good job, and it's allowed us to use our inpatient capacity differently. So that's very good value. But that's kind of the point when it comes to hospital at home or virtual ward models. If they're going to be cost effective for a system, they need to release acute inpatient care, or all you're doing is adding another cost into the system. And I think the analysis of the initial virtual ward pilots was that. So on a patient contact basis, over a day, they were probably slightly better value. On a patient episode basis, probably wasn't much difference. Did they release acute hospital beds? No, they didn't, and that's the challenge. How we're proceeding as a system now, we've agreed a new hospital at home model, so we make a contribution to that. So our advanced nurse practitioners are part of that model, and the model undertakes a test of change process. So we've got a pilot model. We've agreed what it looks like as a system. It's focused on older people with frailty or medical conditions that are leaving acute hospitals, and it commences next Monday. So we're actually piloting that from next Monday with a view to see, is this more cost effective? Does this have the potential to close acute hospital beds?
Thank you, Matthew. And if I could offer comment, Colin, from a system perspective, because I sort of watch it from sitting on the ICB. Hospital at home in the physical health world is a system challenge in essence, because it's not, we may have the staff delivering, but it should be cash releasing from the acute and also pump prime through ICB, and everybody working together, perhaps physicians out of the acute. And so it sits within our priority programme, but much of the activity is outside of our gift and control, and it's a challenge to the system. So we should keep raising it exactly as you have done, and we'll see how the new pilot goes, because you'll recollect from last year the previous pilot was decommissioned, I think was the terminology, and a new pilot was put together, which is what Matthew is responding to. And thank you for raising health inequalities. You've stepped right into the shoes of our recently retired colleague, and I suspect it brought a wry smile to many of our faces in that, Martin, it doesn't sit there, but you've picked up the mantle. Very good indeed. Thank you. Okay, with that, can we note Sue's report, please? And Sue, you also wish approval for our 25-26 priorities. Does board agree with the 25-26 priorities as set out in the paper? Please show if you do not. Okay, I have nobody showing Sue, so that's unanimous. So thank you for that, and which then moves us neatly on to Matthew's operational update. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just struggling to come off mute there. Just starting with children and young people, we've got strong continued improvements in our delivery of therapies through the rollout of the Balanced programme. We've eliminated over 52-week waits now for physio, and there's a rapid reduction in OT waits. So we're on the trajectory for elimination of 52 weeks by July. As we mentioned previously, we've got an ongoing challenge with neurodiversity referrals. We've undertaken a demand and capacity analysis, follow our consultant job planning, and even with increased productivity, our good estimate of how many outpatient slots we're short is about 9,000 a year. So the implication of this is we will not meet national targets for the elimination of 52-week waits this year, and we will not meet the outcomes of the priority action plan with respect to reducing long waits for that group of children. We've got further, we've agreed further executive to executive discussions with ICB leads to agree a sustainable way forward. And moving on to urgent immediate care, urgent and emergency care, sorry, it's been a challenging month, challenging couple of months, March and April. And in fact, this week, at the beginning of May, we've had a critical incident declared at the Acute Trust. Feature of the system remains extremely high bed occupancy, over 100%, 110% currently at the acute. And with us, we've got an additional 25 community hospital beds open, and we've had those beds open almost continuously since November. We've been working closely with system partners on actions arising from the UEC Tier 1 Improvement Notice, which was issued in January 2025. And that's led to a focus on the implementation of a number of system transformations at pace. It's been important the Health and Care Trust has been working alongside the acute, and we've matched the ambition and speed of the response of our partners. As I mentioned, Hospital Home programme commenced a test of change this week, and the emphasis of that programme is moving patients with frailty and medical condition can go home with support as quickly as possible. On a system-wide delivery plan, we've redesigned intermediate care with the ICB and with local authority and the Acute Trust, with a greater emphasis on early decision making, with hospital MDTs making more of those decisions on the ward, and a shorter, more efficient process. This will be enabled over the next few months by the transfer of our current op team to the Acute Trust, where they'll play a specialist role in internally supporting complex decision making. The work and the outcomes of these programmes of work are overseen by UEC committee and in turn by the UEC board, which execs at the Health and Care Trust are key members of. For mental health inappropriate out-of-area placements, our improvement remains on trajectory overall. A revised plan was presented to F&P this month. We've got up to 8 independent sector beds available now at Bark Green, which are part of the commissioned appropriate activity. And last night we were down to just 1 inappropriate out-of-area placement. Alongside inappropriate out-of-area placements, national performance focuses on length of stay. We've submitted our improvement figure as part of our operating plan return. During this phase of our improvement, we've been applying a clinical and QI lens to patient flow, which John has been leading. 2 distinct cohorts were merged of patients using our acute beds. One is with acute mental health needs, people who should be in those beds. We've got an average length of stay of 27 days currently. And there's also a group who clearly have level 2 rehabilitation needs. And our Associate Medical Director has commenced a piece of work to explore how a different rehab bed offer within Worcestershire could be enhanced to meet those higher level of needs. But we've got to be careful within that to balance the limitations of our ambitions for that group of patients with the limitations of our estate. Just to note, we've been involved in a live emergency planning exercise, and this is one which is mandated annually by NHS England. So they choose the exercise we're going to do and set the terms and give it to us live. But this is only one of 4 live exercises that we're participating in this year in our test of business continuity plans. And finally, an item for approval. So following successful relocation of Hillcrest on the former Athlon site from January this year, ward staff requested a change of name, which reflects their improvement journey and a name which differentiates them from the previous older adult ward name. So the older adult ward that was on that site was called Athlon. They wanted a different name. So following the NHS naming convention guidance and keeping consistent theme throughout the unit, so villages in Worcestershire, consultation with staff and service users has generated the name Hinton. So I'm requesting board approval for that name change, and I've been advised by the company secretary that the correct process here is board sign off, following which NHSE and CQC will be informed of the name change. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Let's do that first, so I don't forget, actually, before we move to any questions there. Does board agree to the name Hinton, which I think is probably a reference to Hinton on the Green down near Evesham, I'm guessing.
Hinton on the Green and Hinton St Mary, yes, down by Evesham.
Yeah, okay. Does board agree, or the easiest way, does anybody disagree with the name change as selected by staff? The answer is no, Matthew. Everybody will agree to that for obvious reasons, and I think it's right and proper that we went through the staff so they could select their own name, and I think that was a good and useful thing to do. So that is, from what I can see, approved, Matthew. Can I open it up further then? Any questions that Matthew has that we have for Matthew on his operational update report, please? Fina.
Thank you. Am I off mute? Yeah. The CAMHS waiting time reduction, firstly, I just wanted to say I think that's a really notable success. So congratulations to the team on that. My question was in relation to the ADHD assessment and reviews. You know, we've seen a quite significant transfer of over 16s to independent providers, and your report mentions a contract for 2,000 ADHD reviews. I wondered what assurance can the board take that these arrangements are delivering the intended quality and timeliness, and actually the most importantly, equity of access. You know, specifically, how are we ensuring that the most clinically urgent or disadvantaged children are being prioritised appropriately within that the long wait cohorts?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Should I answer that? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, please. And I can actually add, because I've asked that exact question actually of our clinical director, Fina, very recently actually for that, so I can add to that. Matthew.
Yeah. Okay. So all referrals coming into children and young people, so the paediatric services, go through a clinical triage process and are allocated to category. So depending on the level of children's needs will dictate how long they're waiting. We've also been undertaking a waiting list validation exercise. So we've been contacting everybody who's on the waiting list, finding out about any change of their needs and reprioritising again accordingly, because some people have had long waits and their changes and their needs will have changed. And we also encourage people waiting, if they've got any change to their children's needs, to contact us. And that's something that happens on a daily basis. So daily, our support teams are actually reviewing and reprioritizing appointments in order. For the groups that are now being seen externally, we took a view as a system about, when it would be realistic to say, look, treatment is going to move into an adult phase of life, and we chose the cut-off point at 16 because if you were referred into our services now before 16, you wouldn't get to see the service before you're an adult. So we said, what's reasonable? It felt like 16. The providers that we're working with are licensed to see people over the age of 16, so that was a good fit for them as well. And it means now that children who are 16 are being seen on the same basis as adults. So there's equity. If you're over 16, you're going to get the same service offer in Herefordshire and Worcestershire. For the cohort of people that are being seen for abuse by an independent provider, we looked at, okay, what's the safest clinical thing to do here for which group? And we said, well, look, we've got a group of patients here who've been seen, they've had an assessment, they've got a diagnosis, but in order for us to offer as many diagnoses as possible and set a treatment plan, we need somebody else to do the review. So doing the review, it's not that it's less skilled, but the person's already had diagnosis, they've already got a treatment plan. The review is to check this treatment plan. Is it still safe? Is it still right for the person? So we felt that that was the most equitable way of ensuring that everybody coming through the service had the same initial treatment. For all of that, sorry, I'm giving a very long answer here, Mark, Chair, and I apologise for that. For all of that, I have to emphasise, though, that for as much activity as we've been able to deliver through partners, in the time frame that partners have started delivering activity, the number of incoming referrals has far exceeded that which we've been able to outsource. And some of that is in relation to how much independent sector capacity there is out there. So the same people that can provide initial assessments and reviews are the same people that we could recruit or who could be working within the NHS. There isn't excess capacity out there. And that's reflected in the fact that we've got a partner, Green to do reviews for us. They promised us 10 practitioners. They've only been able to recruit 2. So that's going to take a lot longer. And it's not our unique challenge. This is a challenge across England.
Thank you, Matthew. And I think that outlines the issues that we have. And for my non-executive colleagues' assurance, I've sat with the clinical director responsible who has taken me through the triage process, that exact question you asked. And you can see, just looking into the clinician's eyes, so to speak, their greatest concern is what is on the list that we may be missing. We need to make sure that we get those children that have the greatest need highest up the list, so we do see them and don't miss them, so they don't develop issues that lead to larger problems as they go into adulthood. And I was quite pleased to hear that explanation. And with that, Onyi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you, Chair. And yes, you're absolutely correct. It's an England-wide problem. I'm yet to hear from any of my GP colleagues whose area that they're on top of this particular problem. Unfortunately, like you said, there isn't the capacity in the system. So which begs the question of what's the support? Can you assure me or kind of explain to me what support we are providing for the families and the children while we wait? Because this is such a difficult diagnosis and quite a lot of times the families are struggling. So how much support are we putting behind them? Because a lot of times they can't access a lot of things without that diagnosis. So are we thinking, are we moving into supporting them while we wait, and how are we doing that, please?
So we've got 2 mechanisms really for waiting well. And it's a paradox of families for us even to say waiting well, because if you're waiting a long time for a health service, it's always too long, isn't it? We are, as I say, we're undertaking ongoing waiting list validation, and we're putting more resource into that this week. So at least people are getting and will be getting a contact, and this year they'll also be getting contact from a health professional who can give ongoing advice while they're waiting. But we've got a signposting page in Herefordshire and Worcestershire for neurodiversity, which has got all the available resources agreed by system partners in one place, so the range of agencies and helps that can be available. And we've got very active patient and carer support services and forums. It's not, I appreciate it's not a substitute for actually having the healthcare that you'd like, but it is a strong community, and I know it's something that's very well utilised by children and families in Herefordshire and Worcestershire.
I know I'm on mute. We'll have Janet and then Carol, and then due to timings, we'll have to move on. Janet.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I noticed in the chat that you told us that our community beds are also running at 110% of funded capacity, which I think is worrying. So I wanted to ask Matthew, can you assure us that we aren't having any breaches in quality and safety for patients while this is happening? And also, I think staff find it really difficult working in those circumstances. So are we supporting our staff too?
Yes, so for quality and safety issues, I'm going to, I think, rightly bring in Natalie, who would be the lead in that area. But I'll answer in terms of staff support. We've had to take a flexible approach, I think, with how we're staffing units. So our emphasis is always on safe staffing numbers. And that will depend both on the number of beds we have open. So where we've opened additional beds, we've had to revise safe staffing numbers and deploy additional staff. Those have been temporary staff. That is a pressure against our temporary staffing targets. And we are constantly, concerned that, we're mixing here staff who don't know wards well with staff who do know wards well. We have allowed our matrons and our ward managers to dictate what the staffing looks like. So where they've got more challenging patients, they are free and can say, look, I need more staff for these patients, and we will we'll make sure that's supplied. We also have a process on a daily basis where we're matching patients with the ward they're going to. We're actually considering acuity levels overall for that ward. So some of the challenging conversations we have with system partners are always around if we've got a lot of patients with high levels of needs on a ward, we may at times have to say, look, we're going to have to wait for a bed to be available on a different ward, because for safety and quality reasons, we're not going to move that patient to this ward on this day with the particular mix that we've got there. But I'll hand over to Natalie, because she will definitely give more detail on that.
Thanks, Matthew. I support everything absolutely you've said. So we specifically do one of the 6 monthly safer staffing reviews in February. So we capture the winter data really clearly and how staff are managing that increase in bed capacity. Some of that, as Matthew says, is mitigated by temporary staffing. We don't have the same ability to flex therapy staffing as we do nursing and support workers, which does always cause us a concern about how sufficiently we are able to support people in their rehabilitation needs, but we monitor that and we move resources around where needed. All of the interventions we've done to increase either boarding or reverse boarding and surge capacity have gone through a quality impact assessment and signed off through CPAG, so signed off by myself and John. So we really understand the issues and the risks from an effectiveness and experience and a safety perspective, and we monitor the outcomes of that. I think it's really clear that some of the extra bedded areas are not ideal spaces to put extra beds in, and as Matthew says, that really then does limit your ability to use them effectively. Often they have very poor lines of sight, so you can't put any patient in those. For example, if they're confused or need additional support, they wouldn't be appropriate. So they do limit as well kind of their usage. However, I've really strong faith. We have such a strong matron group who really do vocally make sure that those beds are appropriately used. As Matthew says, they will tell us when it's not appropriate to use them, and we work that through with them and absolutely support them in that. So that I have a really strong assurance from.
Thank you, Natalie. If we now move on to Carol and then finally Beach. Carol.
Just a very quick one, really. I wanted to just acknowledge the inappropriate out-of-area placements. I think, Matthew, you mentioned one, and am I right in picking up in the chat that it's actually down to 0? And so, you know, I think that's a huge amount of work that's gone into that over a long period of time. And I think it's right that we as a board acknowledge where something has gone really well, and it has. And I know the challenge will be to keep it at that level, but I have confidence in that team. So thank you.
Thank you. If I might say, sorry, excuse me. So I might say, I think credit has to go to John's leadership and the focus that we've had in moving through an operational phase, which we needed to do, to a clinical and quality improvement phase. I think that's what's made the final difference in moving that last piece.
Beach.
Thank you. And Chair, you might ask me to take this one offline and perhaps have a wider conversation with others. But we've debated lots of quite detailed operational stuff going on in Matthew's world and more generally across the organisation, and it's given us lots of very, very important detail and colour behind where things are. I was wondering whether I could take the opportunity to maybe ask more strategically, Matthew. We've got the outlook in respect of the next, in respect of what the here and now. But I'm wondering if we look further than that, what do you need more from the board to create a more sustainable way of managing operational effectiveness and build all of our standards across all the vulnerable, challenging areas that we've got up to a level where you feel actually we're not just firefighting, and it's not just about the here and now, but it's about sustainable effectiveness from an operational perspective.
Matthew, before you answer that question, Beej, you're not going to be surprised. I mean, it's a huge and really important question, isn't it? It's about future strategy and future proofing our services. And I think it's worthy of a bigger, wider board discussion, perhaps at a development session rather than here online, to be honest. I think we need to take that elsewhere. Jill, or Leona, if you're on the call, if you could record that as an action, but it's a key fundamental for our future. And as colleagues will know from the email that was crafted and sent out to all board colleagues, we do need to carve out more time to discuss exactly this type of matter, our future, sustainability, strategy, and all those things. Sorry to cut it off, Beej, but I think we'll do a better job to it in a wider, a forum with more time, to be honest. So I saved you that one, Matthew, but I think it's a big question. It's a real question that we do need to have answered, to be honest. Okay, Matthew, thank you for your operational update. If we can note that, please. And we are a little bit behind schedule, but there's some big meaty issues which are obviously of great importance to us. And there's another one just coming up now with the National Staff Survey results. Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. So as colleagues know, each year we have the National Staff Survey, which is essentially feedback to us as an organisation and the NHS more broadly about the staff experience. So we had the results published in March 25 with the embargo lifted around the 13th. I'm pleased to report that we had a 9% uplift in staff responding to the survey. So we went from just under 1,900 staff to over 2,500 responding, a 9% uplift, as I say. To support the engagement of our staff, I think for the first time we've taken a different approach, in so much as we had a Let's Talk session on the 18th of March, which was attended by around 200 of our staff. And the purpose of that was really to ensure that we communicated the results of the staff survey, but also as a way to engage staff more widely and share what the key themes were. So the areas that we're doing really well on, but also not so great, and what we're going to do about it. Some of the detail there is of the 7 people promised themes, we've increased and done better on 5 of those. 2 of those specifically around we are always learning and we are a team, are things that we're going to take forward as specific areas of focus. 9 of the 10 questions in relation to the strength of line manager and employee relationships has also been significantly improved as well. Overall, we are beginning to close the gap between our peer group, but also as an average, and those who are best performing organisations. Should go to my next page. Lost my mouse. I'll continue. One of the things that we are going to be looking at as specific areas of focus going forward are being tracked through 2 specific pathways. We have instigated our 3 subcommittees through the refreshed People and Culture Committee, and we're picking up specific themes through culture, through EDIE, and also through the attraction and retention piece. This does link back to data that we're getting through the National Staff Survey. We also have worked with our operational and STU areas to develop specific action plans, again related to data that we've gotten back from the National Staff Survey. There are 4 key areas of focus as consistent themes that we've picked up, which are around reward and recognition. It's also about us continually being a learning organisation, always learning, ensuring that our staff have a voice that counts, and also ensuring that we have effective teams that are working together. We're supporting our operational and corporate teams through a number of ways. It's integrated into our monthly corporate governance processes. We have regular check and challenge sessions through our OD team, and we're looking at standardising our action planning tool to support our staff. And the reason we're doing this is really to ensure that we embed ownership of this. We want to see this as a process, taking what we learn from the National Staff Survey as one that we all have a stake in. There is a summary that is attached of the action plans that staff can access. It's available on the intranet for colleagues. The plan is that we're going to be doing an interim check and challenge session again, but also an update as a Let's Talk session, sort of where we are generally on this in June, the date of which escapes me, but I think it's the 9th. But don't tie me to that, but I think it's the 9th of June. So I'm happy to take any questions on the staff survey.
Thank you. And I know the tyres have been kicked very well on this subject at People and Culture Board, and there was a specific People and Culture where a lot of the direct reports to the execs came along to explain their plans. Does anybody have any questions at all of what's shown in the paper? No? Okay, I'll just add one thing because I don't think it's widely known. If you take the 9 areas of people promise that the staff survey is predicated on, and then add in the response rate as a 10th area. Of the 10 areas, our trust leads 7 of them, of the providers in our system. And I don't think that's sort of widely known, hence I put it in the public forum now to demonstrate the success we're having, not being complacent, there's much work to do, but we are very much leading the way locally, and that's reflective of the work that's gone in, and indeed reflective of our staff. And I think our chief executive noticed the well-being offer when she went to induction for our staff, and I think it's probably reflective of how we are trying our best to address staff concerns, staff issues, and I know that the People and Culture Committee takes a very strong interest in this area as well. So congratulations to all concerned, and we look forward to improving all those scores next year, because of course the staff survey will be upon us very, very quickly, won't it? I think September. And so we're in that range now of ensuring staff are aware of the importance. Okay, thank you, Elaine. Can we all note that report, please? And with that, thank you. We note that and move to risk management strategy. And Jill.
Yes, so this is the annual review of the risk management strategy, and the report confirms the work that has been undertaken over the past year and the context in which we found ourselves at the start of 24-25, and the issues that had previously been raised as part of the well-led inspection. The report obviously sets out the details of the work undertaken and the assurance that we've received in respect of that work, and that's obviously presented for information of board, but also the milestones that have been achieved in year from the existing risk management strategy. So what I have presented here, as well as that update, is a slightly revised risk management strategy. It's been very much tweaked rather than any fundamental overhaul, which arises primarily from one of the internal audit reports, which, whilst it gave significant assurance, raised a couple or a small number of low-level recommendations, just to explicitly include in the strategy the frequency of reporting on the board assurance framework and risk management to board and principal committees, to cover explicitly again about training. And so I have revised that in the risk management strategy. And then the other area that has been changed is the milestones for the forthcoming year, which are very much again focused on ensuring that risk management is embedded as a business as usual activity, and that the reporting continues, and the support and challenge across both our SDUs and corporate functions continues, as well as meetings with executive colleagues, that we look at midway through the year, once we've safely got RIO fully embedded, as to whether we need to consider a change of software. We currently use Ulysses, and it is probably one of the older software systems that is on the market that covers risk management, but we also use it for a number of other functions as well. But we will look at that later in the year, once we've got over the implementation of RIO. And also some specific tasks that we'll do in year, such as development of an e-learning module for risk management, to hopefully make that easier to have a range of learning methods available for our staff, and to continue to refine the risk quantification matrix. I wasn't going to add anything else, but I'm happy to take any questions on the detail. But as I said, the revised risk management strategy is very much about tweaking rather than any fundamental overhaul.
Thank you, Jill. And this does feel like the culmination of a significant amount of work and progress within you and your team on this matter. So first of all, thank you for putting us in the position that we're in. Does anybody have any questions at all? It's a comprehensive report, and it's a subject that's been brought to us quite regularly over the last sort of 18 months, to be honest, as we top ourselves up on risk management. No? Can we agree the strategy tweaked, as Jill described it, the tweaked strategy as set out, please, in our papers? There's no dissent, so we can take that as approved, Jill. Thank you very much indeed. Which then takes us to our final item before we take a quick break. Another matter that's been trialled through many forums. But Scott, quick update on where we are with our improvement plan, please.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to present all of the work conducted over the financial year of 24-25, recognise how far we've come, but also recognise the work that we need to do going forward. And then the paper describes where this work will move to going forward. As a reminder, the improvement plan came from an extensive staff engagement exercise in which over 1,000 staff gave their views of what they wanted to see as being different within the trust. From there, we developed 6 work streams, which are obviously very, very well versed, which focused on delivering those changes that staff said they wanted. Within the paper, we look at within each work stream, the key programs of work which sat within those. And I must say, it's been fantastic to be able to see how many of those are threading through all the other reports today, and really see how they are starting to become business as usual. In terms of overall impact, there's some really pleasing stuff in here, and it really does lean into Elaine's National Staff Survey report, and also the Pulse survey, where we can see there is a continuing upward trend in our culture score, which for those of you who are at SLT, we have now started to tentatively do some SPC charts around this, which are starting to show a statistically significant variation. We have seen an increase in our recommend as a place to work through the staff survey. We have seen an over 2% increase in terms of recommend the care of the organisation in the staff survey. Really importantly, 9 of the 10 metrics relating to my immediate line manager have gone up by over 1%. So whilst those are all fantastic, it is only the start. So moving forward, the key focus will be of transitioning the improvement plan into the core business as usual. So that will involve through Sue and the organisational strategy, ensuring that the culture and what staff want from the organisation are thoroughly embedded, and ensuring that the underpinning programmes of work are really represented in updated strategies. So people and culture strategy, for example, which will be overseen and held through People and Culture Committee. The things which board really need to be aware of going forward is the importance of staff engagement. Out of all the metrics that we look at, that is the one that relates to quality of care. So that is one of the ones we really need to hold on to. And there is a very clear correlation between I would recommend as a place to work and CQC rating. So that is another one where we really need to keep a consistent focus on everything we're doing on those 2 key areas. As we move through into transitioning into the strategies, there will also be a process of using external validation to understand how much progress we have made and help develop those further plans. So we need to have the conversation there about the extent of that, whether it's a full well-led review, and those are the kind of things we just need to unpack going forward. But overall, just want to say a huge thank you to colleagues who have obviously helped drive an awful lot of this work. Yeah, very open to questions, Mark, or if we've got time.
Yeah, of course we have. Vina.
There we go. Very good. Scott, thank you for that. And it's really good to see how much progress has been made. And as you mentioned, it's particularly good to see that so much of the improvement plan is actually referred to in other papers, even if it isn't referenced directly. We can see this becoming business as usual, which then begs the question as to how, as a board, we will continue to have oversight of phase 2 of the improvement plan. As delivery shifts from plan-led to embedded business as usual in SDUs and corporate teams, what mechanisms will hold SDUs accountable for embedding those improvements locally, and how will we receive assurance about that at board level?
As ever, Vina, straight to the heart of the matter. And I think Scott would recognise that because that's an ongoing discussion. Scott, could you respond, please?
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously more work to do in that space, but that's one of the things myself and Sue will very much be picking up as we transition some of this through to the main organisational strategy. So there'll be that mechanism there. I do think there is something about those using some of those core metrics discussed in the paper throughout our other papers, so that we can start to see the relationship, particularly the People and Culture report, and particularly the National Staff Survey report. They're quite critical in that space. The other aspect, which perhaps we haven't spoken about too much today, is the integrated governance process. So, there's still work to be done there, but we've made good progress with supporting staff to embed that throughout the organisation. But ensuring that is working properly is going to be critical, and that is one of the areas where external review and validation of how well the integrated governance is working will be one way which board should really derive assurance.
Thanks, Scott. Sue, I expect you're adding to that, yes?
Yeah, well, I would say, yeah, coming in on the same point, really. Yeah, Vina, I was reflecting because as a board, we were talking last year about how we wanted to make sure that the staff understood that the improvement plan was part of the way we worked as an organisation, but it sort of felt maybe a little bit over there, and then we'd got a work programme over, and I'm hoping this year by putting it down into the 13 priorities we approved earlier, you can see the improvement journey all the way through those, and we know many of those are over a longer period of time. So I think that's the bedrock of the 5-year strategy, pulling through those cultural and leadership elements in particular. Scott and I obviously doing the work with Ellen, who also wants to see how we basically cement that improvement journey in with clearer metrics. So I think it builds on your point earlier. The measures we select for the committees around each one of those priority programmes, we've got to make those as the best we can make them in terms of what we know about the impact we're trying to achieve. So we'll get our first run around that in July, won't we? But we've got measures. I think we're continually testing them. Are these going to do the right things for our patients and carers? And if not, we need to be quicker at saying those aren't the things that we believe are really keeping us awake at night as a board. We're going to look at those and look again at doing some co-production to get different things that we can get into that space, so we're all assured that we're moving in the right direction. So a bit like the fourth bridge maybe for boards, that one, but it feels like that's the important role for us all here today.
Thank you, Sue. And to add to your analogy of the fourth road bridge and the continual painting of it, I think there's another aspect of this as well, which is our collective thinking as an organisation and the quality improvement programme. I think John, the lead that via Anna and co. We need to start to think, how are we going to ensure that we maintain that continual improvement cycle, that quality improvement, the be better, whether individually, collectively or organisationally, and keep that going, because our improvement plan isn't a finite thing. It's it's embedding our desire to continually improve in all that we do, and actually keeping an eye on how we do that and seek assurance is not the easiest thing, but that shouldn't detract us from trying to assess our culture of continuous improvement as well. Okay, thank you, Sue, and thank you for the question, which is a key question, Vina, in the improvement methodology. Can we note Scott's report of where we are on our improvement plan, please? Thank you very much. No dissent to that. Thank you, colleagues. We're a little bit behind time, but we'll catch up next. But I propose if we take a 10-minute break, comfort and refresh glasses break now, and we reconvene at 11:20, please. 11:20.